Now? It works now? Way what is it small text?
All right. Can you talk?
Talking.
Yeah, it seems to be good now.
Okay.
You put the link in the group so people watch.
So after we identify what are sources of knowledge for us, just like any research and methodology, you have to identify what the source of knowledge is. But we come to the issue of authentication. So the Bakeoni is a small text, which is very introductory text, which is giving us about 32 odd areas of knowledge or different areas of study in hadith. And these are all about authentication. Why do we take this type of hadith over that type of hadith? And so we mentioned You're gonna have to do a review a little bit. We mentioned that there is. Let me do it this way because last time we did the review was last time we did the class. We used the Arabic text, so we're good. So within the context of the 7 theories, the Baconia fits in the side of authentication. As far as warakat, the tie-in, the warakat is a small text, but it deals with usul al-fiqh as an overall framework. So how the Baconia and the warakat complement each other is in this area right here, the khabar, which is dealing with hadith. Is dealing with hadith. Uh, the warakat is going to talk about when we start talking about the concept of sunnah. The warakat is going to deal with hadith, but it just says khabar, different types of hadith, in a very simple way, and it's going to talk about the actions or acts of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Like, for instance, do we have to? Is everything that the Prophet did, as far as an act, an obligation on us, until proven otherwise? That's the rule that they bring to the team. Or is everything a recommendation until proven otherwise? So, in the context of the hadith, you have things that the Prophet said, that the Prophet did, that the Prophet consented to. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Also, things related to how the Prophet looked, his appearance. That's not mentioned because usually in Usul al-Fiqh, this is how they define Sunnah and the limits. After they identify Sunnah as a source of knowledge, they really focus on Sunnah from this angle. Why? Because that's where they're getting the fiqh from, the knowledge of halal and haram. But the scholars of hadith, they add on how the Prophet looked, how he looked, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Hadith can communicate that, and also his character. So right now I'm just showing you that these two types of texts, they overlap with each other at some points, and the knowledge, like the Baykuniya is just mostly focused only on hadith, whereas the Warakat is focused on principles of thinking, is focused on how you understand the Quran, like some basic rules, how you understand the Sunnah, how some basic ideas of qiyas or analogy, because that type of thinking you need to have to be able to answer the question that when the Quran and Sunnah is silent on an issue, how do you determine what's Islamic and what's not Islamic? Is it that you just make it up from your own head? Or is it that the Quran and the Sunnah, Q and S for Quran and Sunnah, may not be explicit, like in the sense of give you in detail 1, 2, 3 as a command for action X, but it may give you a general GP, not gain piece, general principle for this action. So how do we determine that? So we have to go into the issue of extending the ruling from the Quran and the Sunnah. That has rules to it. How do we extend out? And then more specifically, the issue of qiyas. How do we make an analogy? And we gave the famous example, the issue of alcohol. How alcohol becomes the basis of how we talk about the prohibition of ecstasy, kush, whatever drugs are out there. They just explode exponentially. So some things Quran Sunnah are clear, and some things need to be extracted out. How do we extract that? Those principles and values out, and that's kind of what usul al-fiqh deals with. You know, this is it's not meant to be 100% clear right now because we're just kind of making connections.
But Kunya is that poem which just clarifies those types of hadith, right? Sure.
Yeah, we left off on this,
Okay.
but the point of authentication comes back to, remember we were talking about the 5 conditions of Sahih, of what constitutes a Sahih hadith. You guys remember that or no? Remember that we said that there's 5 conditions?
Yeah.
What are they? Remember?
Chain of narration.
What about the chain of narration?
It needs to be
Connectivity.
Connectivity.
Yeah.
Meaning that it needs to be connected. Simply put, if you go into a building and you don't have awesome service, your bars go down. For whatever reason. Could be that you're in a bad location, whatever it may be, the reasons. The connectivity there's a break. So here, this is the issue of connectivity. That these other types of classification of hadith, this is basically considered da'if. Different variations of the hadith that's da'if, and we're only at this point really talking about, or primarily we should say, talking about the chain of transmission. Scholars have classified it where they put things into a pattern. So this means when we say mu'allaq, like for somebody says, the Prophet ﷺ said, say Bismillah before drinking. There's no chain of narration. So we drop the whole chain of narration. So when that's done, we call it mu'allaq. When that is done. Because we're indicating, we mentioned before that hadith has 2 parts. Hadith has 2 parts. The chain of transmission, meaning how the information came to us. Who told us? People. Who were the people that you got the information from? And the actual text of what was said. So a lot of hadith studies is dealing with this part because we're dealing with authentication. But that doesn't mean that we don't look at the knowledge as well. We look at the knowledge. But here, when we start talking about the Sahih Hadith, when the connectivity breaks, as soon as it breaks, for instance, in the Sahih Hadith, this connectedness has to be there. That means person A, right, communicates from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So person B is communicating from person A. There has to be a relationship between, and the same thing here, between C and D. If it happens to be the case that there's a break, say for instance, these 2 disappear, and so A directly communicates, or D directly communicates from A, so to speak, that's what you call mu'allaq. That there's 2 consecutive breaks in the chain. And if there is, in general, just kind of as a concept, if this is the Sahabi right here. If the Sahabi disappears, if A disappears, and you have B, C, D, that type of concept, and this is from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then that's when you have the Mursal Hadith. That's just simply introducing the idea. We begin to develop more and more understanding of these concepts with time. We add on information. Now issue of the tadlis or the mudallis is that here these people, they make it seem like they heard the information. We need to drink some tea. You guys went partying last night? So the tadlis, sometimes, look, we can call it a day and say, just study Sahih Bukhari. Right? Then it's like you don't have to deal with all this stuff. Because you're just dealing with authentic hadith. But the reason why in the beginning we went through all of that process, like the theories of usul and civilization and all of that, because the issue of revival is extremely important. Right? Issue of revival is extremely important. Revival doesn't take place without having a solid understanding. You know, since yesterday I'm like dragging. I saw this video. I showed some of the this. I didn't put it in the whole of the group. And it had happened, or they put it on recently. It was a young boy, supposedly Muslim, with other Muslims. And so they looked like they drugged some girl, Minnesota, European American, mostly probably non-Muslim. And so she's there in the car sleeping. Bang, bang, bang. And he actually physically, touched her in the wrong way. And he's just saying all kind of crazy stuff. And then I was talking to some of the brothers from Mass, so I was saying, who do you think is the most solid person in Islamic fiqh in this area? Like, who can we go into a discussion with? There's like when Maulana Maududi talks about Jahiliyyah, is not the same concept as Sayyid Qutb 100%. So, brother was like, it's very difficult for him to even answer that question. So I was looking at both of those things, and I was just like, it weighed heavy on me. One is the youth situation. I know that environment because I've been there. And all the brothers verified. Actually, Sheikh Hamza, who was here doing the Shamal program, he's actually married to a Somali sister. He speaks Somali, European American brother. And he lives in Minnesota. So we were talking, he was like, there's a massive disconnect between the elders and their grandchildren. You see the generation thing? And then another brother, he comes and he tells his whole story. He said, I went through all of that. He said, I went through that. I didn't have anybody to talk to, period. And I got lost. And it took me a long time to come back. And so then I was thinking to myself, like, where's the movement at? Like, where's the community at? You have this massive issue where these youth, they're going into like a jahili. It's like a reverse, right? And then also from the angle of the fiqh itself, like we ourselves, where are we at with even with the knowledge thing? You see what I'm saying? So it's like it becomes, how do we understand? How do we develop fiqh? How do we have a comprehension of the deen? And then how are we applying? Those are the two situations. So we try to bring all this in, so that our thinking is solid. So for instance, when it comes to hadith scientists, a lot of us may not use this in the real sense, like we're not going to become muhaddithin. But it gives us a framework, right? So that when we're developing our fiqh, or when we're dealing with people, or when we're dealing with issues, we have intellectual tools that are grounded in time-tested methodologies of thinking that will guide our thinking, versus we just come up with ideas, right? So for instance, in the issue of tadlis, there's an appearance that this person may make it seem like they actually heard from that person. But in order for you to be able to detect that, you have to have an understanding of That's a possibility of it happening. You can't have this deluded idea, oh, mashallah, everything is great, people don't lie. And then there's the issue of how do you detect whether the person heard or didn't hear? So you have to be able to develop a system of understanding what, people may come up with concepts. Like there's a lot of tadris going on. Like basically Pence just said that they're going into Iran was because of 9/11. How do you make that relation? Like how do you draw that relationship between concept A and concept D? How do you draw the relation? So the idea of the science of hadith is that it gives us tools. Even if you say, well, I don't need to use it because I only will rely on what the scholars say for hadith. But it still gives us tools. Like for here, when it comes to people communicating information, you're able to use it in other realms. I know a brother who was doing his PhD in biology. He actually got kicked out. He was doing it at the graduate level, and basically he started using the sciences of hadith, and he says research A and research B, they never verified each other, so a lot of the research on this issue is not even usable because it's not authentic in its transmission. They brought in the principle of the science of hadith, and the teacher got so angry that you can't do that. You're questioning our whole foundation. But you see, the idea is that these things can be applied in other areas. But for our purposes here, when there's a break in the connectivity, when there's a break in this chain, we look at the different types of breaks. One, it may be that the person may not be there. One, it may be that there may be more than one person that's missing in the chain. One, it may be that there's a person a person makes us believe that they actually heard from the person that came before him or her, even, because that works there. So then, for instance, when the hadith is ma'lul, or it has an illah, it has a hidden defect, man, that's super hard to discover. But with time, they call it ta'anni, so they get patient in the process. Things are unveiled. How are we able to understand a lot of these things, period? We didn't talk about the munqati. It could be a break in any point in the chain. But how do we come to understand these things? When we bring all of the narrations together. And when we collate the information, then this knowledge set, these chains of transmission, compared to these, then you start seeing discrepancies. Right?
Okay.
So that's always how, as a general rule, you can determine a lot.
But sometimes when you had two narrations, they also reinforce each other, and the Zayd becomes Hassan, right?
Yes.
Depending upon.
Yes. That's in the process of that's in the process that if we can like for instance, if you have some of the hadith, that's when we start talking about the daif category. Like for instance, saying the mursal hadith. Mursal hadith, it was accepted early by the early imams. Like Abu Hanifa and Malik. But the later imams stopped accepting it because they said, like, between us and them, between us and the Prophet Muhammad, there's more people, so we're like, so we can't accept that a hadith that just claims that the tabi'in heard from the companion. And there's more details to this, but the idea is there. At this stage, we're not going to go into tons of details. We're just getting terminology and getting a basic framework, and then a lot of this stuff will repeat with more detail later on. What will happen, I will tell you this, and I actually was having this conversation with Adam, that it's fairly reasonable to ask for this and the waraqat to be memorized in a year's time. I mean, everybody's not going to do it, but it's fairly reasonable. But another thing that comes up is that all of this stuff in the next module, in the fifth module, is all going to come up in an applied form. This is all theoretical without any application. there's two sciences. There's the science in pure theory and science applied. So you'll see the real benefit of this stuff when you study fiqh. It comes up in different situations. You know what I'm saying? Can we use a mursal hadith? Mostly the Hanafis and the Malikis, they use mursal hadith. And that, as a consequence of, they say that, well, this is not da'if for us. This is for you, everybody that follows Shafi afterward. That creates differences of opinion amongst the. So this one will have one opinion on the issue, this one will have another opinion on the issue. So that's the first issue, that when there's a break in the chain, when it goes from the natural progression. And what is the natural progression? The natural progression is that there's a relationship between everybody that's relating. When something happens in this chain of transmission, whether it's two people are missing consecutively, or one person is missing from here, munqati. Actually, the munqati in the mursal, they can overlap in meaning, because the munqati means that there's a break, one break in the chain somewhere. Could be in any place. So this is the mu'adil, right? There's a consecutive break between two people. Munqati is a break somewhere in the chain, meaning one person is missing. That's the same thing as mursal, but mursal says that that's here, the sahabi. The sahaba that heard from the Prophet. So if the sahaba is missing, it's considered mursal. So any break in the any break here in the natural progression of the chain of transmission, so to speak, the narration becomes weak. And then we get other types of other classifications of hadith. Is that too complicated or no?
I think concept-wise it is clear.
But when you said connectivity chain, again, different muhaddisin had different criteria, right? Like there may be connected, means you may have all the names, but this guy never met him, or the life, like they were not in the same place, those types of things.
No, that they work with that.
Okay.
You're right. That's a good point. That from the angle of here, we have conditions of strength. So the scholars of hadith, they don't just say, we only accept hadith when following this set of conditions, the highest set, so to speak. They do grades.
Oh.
Right? So all of this will fall within the realm of the Sahih. But it may not be at the highest grade. Right?
It is still sahih because it's connected.
Yeah, it's connected. But it's not just it can't be that they are in different places. It really, in this situation that you're talking about, where between two criterias, is that they actually met and we can prove it, or they have the potential of meeting.
Yeah.
So the potential, this is Bukhari, this is Muslim. So for instance, the potential of meeting, it can mean that I'm living in Japan majority of my life.
Yeah.
You know, okay, you can say, well, you can meet over the internet.
Yes, now obviously, not in those.
Of course not in those days, but I'm giving you the idea.
Oh, for now.
That I'm giving you the idea,
Yeah.
they thought like that too. Well, how can they connect?
Somebody in Makkah and Medina,
Mm.
there is a good potential they'll probably meet.
Actually,
Kind of, right?
remember when we were, there's a potential of meeting. Remember when I was asking about the Indian billionaire the Hindu one,
The Ambani.
right? So the issue becomes, well, this is no different than network theory. Facebook does this.
Yeah.
Suggest your friends. This person lives, and then they even once they plug in your location, then all of a sudden, because you're in that location, they suggest to you. They do it's the same concept, except that we have some criteria. But when you said that, when we talked about that guy, it was like, what is the relationship between this person and that? That's the same thing that they do in Hadith sciences. So that's why in Hadith sciences, history, biography becomes important. Geography, in addition to the issue of trying to determine when human beings lie or when human beings make mistakes. What kind of mistakes? We mentioned that before, that they even got to a point where it's like they had classified the issue of Alzheimer's way before, because they talked about like the photographic memory and then the memory that's kind of weak, and then the memory that it's like one time you had the guy, he was awesome, he had a photographic memory, he can memorize everything. Then when he hit 45, 47, started to get weak. Then 50 years old, poof, he started having real signs of dementia by the time he hit like 55. So then they'll even get it to that point that when he beat, prior to the 40s, he was awesome. So we take the hadith at that time, brother. And remember that hadith sessions would be like, you come to the hadith session. Who came to the hadith session? What's your name? Yeah. Akrama who? Because there could be 1,000 Akramas. There could be 1,000 Akrama Hashmis. I'm serious. I'm serious. I'm serious. That comes up too. That comes up in the hadith sciences, because you can have Muhammad Abdullah. Say, Muhammad Abdullah. How many Muhammad Abdullahs are? You type it into Google. And then, anybody who's in the HR department, they run through that problem at a basic level. You can have same people in the corporate, so then it becomes a date issue, your birthday.
Yeah.
Or it becomes some other data. So they collect all that data about the person to know their background. So they'll even go to the point where this person came to Islam at this time, and the person's father was a non-Muslim, and there, other economic situations. But in the hadith class, they know who came because they have ledgers. You got up and you left. Even sometimes they would take it to another level, where it's like Salman was looking at the computer screen half of the time in the class. I'm serious. You ever see? There was actually this. If sometimes if you're distressed and you kind of want to like watch movies, I advise you watch like Chinese movies from the past, like war and all that, because there's not a lot of kissing and all that stupid stuff. But they have in one movie that there was a guy they made fun of it, the guy that the general, his wife was super tough, right? So he was trying to build an army because there was pirates that were coming and were invading, and they were coming from Japan, and they were taking the land of the Chinese. This is the concept. And so his military was weak. And so he saw these villagers that they were brave and equality, and in any event, they became his crew, so to speak. So one time he invited them to his house, and his wife disrespected him in front of the whole Jama. It was terrible. So she even smacked him in front of the whole Jama. So one of the tough guys from the village was like, General, what you need to do is when you go to bed at night, you take your sword, you put it to that neck, and show her the back. I mean, crazy. You know, he was a leader. He had to negotiate that emotion and the emotion of his wife and so on and so. So anyway, they make a plot. They plot on her, and so they said we're gonna eliminate her for the general because she's just so disrespectful. So they bring her in. So they tell the general, we invited your wife. And so in the meantime, they tell the general when she comes, take out your sword, chop over her, that type of thing. So he's like, that's my wife, you know, that's that type of concept. So he has to figure out how to get out of it. So in the process of how to get out of it, he has to please the group and please his wife at the same time. So guess what? So then the people that are in the administration with the general, one of them is a historian on the side. So he's writing down everything that's happening. That's why I'm saying all that. He's writing down everything that's happening. So when it came to the point where they made up, and they gave each other a kiss, but it wasn't like in the haram way, right? Then the guy tells him, don't write that in the history. You see what I'm saying? But we don't think about those things. We don't think about that. In the past too, they had their own technology. In the past, they were advanced on a lot of things. Maybe sometimes more than us in details. So the same thing with this. Like they had history, they had biography, they had geography. So they had to be able to determine if this person at 15 claimed that they were in Iraq. It takes about 150 days to be on a horse. You know, they knew that. So then, how could that person claim at 17, you know, that person, you know, went to America? That type of idea. So they have to be able to determine if the person was actually there or possibly there in the locations. Right? And so that requires for them to have a lot of different types of knowledge. So that's why they say the sciences of hadith is one of the most difficult sciences, because it's meticulous in that regard. And then they developed a reputation where some of the scholars some of the scholars like to just go through the thinking process. You know, what benefit do you get from the hadith? You know, like the usuliyin, they like patterns. The usuliyin, the scholars of usul, they like to apply principles. But the scholars of hadith are meticulous. They have to go through different types of knowledge. And that's how even with this, to get to the point to see if there's a hidden defect in the hadith, you have to be meticulous. You have to be able to determine issues. Like for instance, part of, like where you see how you were trying to figure out what's going on with the mic. If we can determine exactly why it was that the other cord didn't work, then we can identify what's the defect of that cord. And is the defect in the cord, or is it in the battery, or is it in, you know, the transmission? What is it? Is it in the device? You know, that's the whole process. Like, which one is it? So that's how they have to determine: is it in the chain of transmission? Is it in the text? And so when you see that they go through the whole process, when we finally say that the hadith is sahih, there's a certain level of confidence that you have because they went through such a meticulous process. Right. And it's not like the way that we do knowledge now. You know, everybody thinks they're a scholar because they get the iPad and Google and they just download a whole bunch of information. But imagine they're going hadith by hadith, person by person. You have to go through the whole process of just understanding this person. Whole process to just understand this person. And then did these people actually meet? See what I'm saying? So when we talk about connectivity, that is what we're talking about. We're talking about this relationship between the people that are narrators. And how tight is that relationship? And anytime there's a failure in connectivity, we have patterns. What kind of failure is it in that connectivity? That will take it from the level of being sahih, right? That we're we're looking at that there is an actual relationship and a connection between those who relate to information. You know, what type of failure is it? What pattern does it fit into? Does it fit into that the chain was completely knocked off, that there's two missing in the chain? Or that the Sahabi is missing, or there's a break somewhere in the chain? Or does it happen that someone beautified their speech, so to speak, so that it can hide the fact that they actually did not hear the information from the people that they claim? That's tadlis. Tadlis is to beautify it so the person thinks that what? You heard. So here goes some examples here. So which one is this? If the companion is missing out of that category that we talked about, which one is it?
Mursal.
Yep. That's in general, right? There's Mursal has more detail, but this is just a beginning point. So when the companion is missing, Mursal. What about when there's two breaks in the chain? Muad, right? Consider. What about when there's a break anywhere in the chain?
Munkat.
Munqati. So that's kind of, it gives you a little bit of a framework in that regard. Any questions? Any rebuttals? Bro, are you having a hard time over there? You have allergies?
No, just Chicago.
Chicago weather? Bro, don't compare. We've been in summertime weather, bro. So this is in the file. So it does the Baykuniya, and it gives a little bit of an explanation. It's only 41 pages. Right. And we also have the Baykuniya. This was actually translated by Dr. Abu Zaid. He's actually from Ikra too, but he's on the East Coast. So this is the whole, we have this in the file too. So this is the whole poem. Let's see how much of it we understand before going to the book. So it's beginning with line number 1. So we should be able to understand to about right here. Even a little more than here, but this should be clear for us. Who wants to attempt? Who wants to attempt? To share how they understand. So he begins with the
Hamdan.
right. He begins with the hamd. The ulama they debate about this issue. Should you begin with the basmala? Should you begin with the hamdulillah? Either way, basmala or alhamdulillah is okay.
Yeah.
It's from the sunnah of the ulama to begin with some sort of dhikr in that regard. If you go with the basmala, is in imitation of the Quran. Even the hamdulillah is in imitation of the Quran. The reason why they even bring up that discussion is because there's some hadith that say that everything should begin with the basmala, or else basically the barakah is devoid. But those hadith don't have strength, so to speak. So you have to have some support from somewhere else to be evidence to support your action as an act of deed. So they say the Quran. The Quran gives that type of justification for us to do that all the time. To either begin with the basmala or the hamdulillah because of the Fatiha. So he said salawat on the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we mentioned that, it's interesting. He begins with this dhikr of Allah wa ta'ala and the salawat on the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the topic itself is about the Prophet, because hadith sciences is the study of the Prophet. Quranic sciences is the study of the Quran, the speech of Allah. Hadith sciences is another way to study the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. From the side of what? From the side of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what he said, what he did, what he consented to. And we mentioned that these scholars of hadith, they add on his physical features, alayhi salatu wasalam, and his character. All of that is contained in the hadith or the sunnah. This is the definition for sunnah, actually. This is the definition for sunnah. This is the scholars of usul al-fiqh. They define sunnah in that regard. Aside from saying that sunnah is a source of knowledge, in a more detailed sense, they give the definition that sunnah is what the Prophet said, did, or consented to. And then the scholars of hadith, they add this to this. And they say also his physical features. That's all part of knowledge of this, and his character. And so here, وَلِمِنْ أَقْسَامِ الْحَدِيثِ عِدَّةٌ. So here, when we start talking about the aqsam or the classifications, what are we talking about?
The types of hadith.
Like what? Give me an example.
Sahih, Hasan, Da'if.
No, that's why I said that. That's not. Why? Because give me the types of hadith from the angle that you just mentioned. You said Sahih.
Yeah. Hasan,
Uh-huh.
Da'if, and Mawdu.
Okay, well, let's leave the mawdu as part of the da'if, the weakest side. This is only 3. So here is not talking about the rulings on the hadith, but these are rulings. Here's talking about the different types of knowledge, classification, or divisions. That the knowledge of hadith has, a number of divisions to it. Some say about 100. Some say a little less than that. Depends on how detailed you go. So in that regard, now he begins. The tricky part is that he uses this statement of the hadith division, and then he goes into the sahih, right? Immediately. So it gives you the idea that he's talking about that, but it's not. The Baykuni is not the issue of the Baykuni. What Hajj? What's going on, bro? There's a protest today. U.S. Don't bomb Iran protest.
Yeah.
So the Baykuniya is not considered. For instance, you have Apple as a setup as far as a computer, and it has its techniques. And then you have another computer system that may be better for something else, right? But both of them are computers. So sometimes one is given preference over others because of quantity and in the way the screen works and the way that it processes and stuff like that. So the same thing with the way that we organize the material. The Baykuni is not considered the highest level of organization. So like for instance, like this point that you just made up, that you just brought to our attention, not made up, but that you just brought to our attention. Here, the way that he constructed the poem, because after all, this is a poem. The way that he constructed the poem is not tightly ordered. So for instance, there's another book, it's called the Nukhba, Nukhbat al-Fikr of Imam Hafiz ibn Hajar. The Nukhba, what it did was that, because so many people were writing on hadith sciences, the Nukhba, what it did, it just came and said, we need to bring organization to all these. And not only that, we need to have an internal structure of how we present this in a logical way. And so the Nukhba has a more tight structure. And so actually that's why, one of the reasons why we spend a lot of time on the Sahih concept, right, and the 5 conditions. Because the Nukhba, the way that Hafiz ibn Hajar did it, he focuses on those 5 concepts, and then after you grasp those 5 concepts, those 5 conditions, I should say, for the Sahih Hadith, everything that flows afterwards in the book, it flows out of that idea. So there's an interconnection between every idea. So sometimes in the Baykuniya, they say يقدم ويؤخر أشياء. يعني sometimes he presents an idea which really shouldn't be presented first, it should be presented later. Or sometimes he delayed an idea which should have been presented first. Right? So that's all within the academic stuff, how he presented the information. So here, in any event, why does he begin with talking about the Sahih? Because the Sahih is the axis of the ilm.
Highest.
Not the highest.
Highest is Quran.
No. The tricky point here, we mentioned this, that one thing that he did here is he didn't begin with the mutawatir, which is the highest.
That's type of Sahih, right? No?
It's not a type of Sahih, because Sahih, the trick here, we can say yes and no. In a lazy way, we can say yeah. But in a more scholarly way, we can say no. Why? Because the definition. The definition of the Sahih is specific. And the definition of the Mutawatir is specific. But we understand, both of them are Sahih, right? What differentiates the Sahih from the Mutawatir?
So it has to be from multiple sources, multiple chain of narration, same hadith.
That should be from multiple sources as well.
No, even one chain of narration, as long as they are all sound narrators, it becomes Sahih, right? Even if you have only one chain of narration, as long as they are, if Imam Malik, and then from that, if we had the authentic.
This is exactly what you're talking about, the issue of number. 1 or 2 chains that Mutawatir doesn't get into. Because there's so overwhelming amount of information of people transmitting that is not about the numbers. And also, guess what? It's not about the authentication. It's so overwhelming that the criteria that we have for the Sahih doesn't apply to it.
You don't look at the chain or anything in case of Mutawatir.
They look at the chain regardless, right? But it's not. They look at the chain regardless because they're meticulous. But it's not depending upon that because it's so overwhelming that it's not. Usually, when you decrease in the numbers of when you don't meet the criteria for the Mutawatir, that's when you get the Sahih.
If you don't have so many overwhelming number of narrations.
That's when we come to the Sahih. And so then it's really the Ahad, we should say. Mutawatir, Ahad. So once you don't have the amount of hadith for the Mutawatir, all this stuff becomes more familiar. That's why we have this, that's why we front loaded this intensive before getting into details. So that at least you have some language, you have some terminology. Some of you already studied it, but at least it's there in your universe. You heard it before. It's not new. It's not, not like getting smacked in the face for the first time. There's a shock value in that. after you know that that could potentially happen, you get used to it. There's no fear, there's no shock, there's no anything. So that's the same thing with the information because it becomes heavy. So the Sahih is he begins with the Sahih first because it is the axis of knowledge after the Mutawatir. Or Ashraf al-Na'a. Yeah, it has the most honored of types. So it means that it has no broken chain. The issue of ittisal. And that's what, that's where we got into all of this. That's the first thing. That the way the transmission of information that comes to you, it has to be squeaky clean, solid. You can't work in the VA without that background check. That's the same thing. It has to be solid, connected. And then not only that, it can't just be solid in the connection. The people that are narrating it, you can't have one of them goes against the group of people that are known to be the experts in the field. See what I'm saying? It's not that he's da'if. It's that, all of them are considered sahih or reliable that are narrating in the Sahih Hadith. Everybody in the chain is considered reliable. But if one of them in the chain goes against a group of people that are known for their expertise in communicating hadith, then that's what you call the chef. That's what you say that he's contradicting the group. So you have a group of people that become the criteria because they're known for their memory, they're known for their accuracy, they're known for their deen, they're known for all of these things, for the work that they put in. So when you have this guy over here, he's known, he's good. But when he contradicts this group over here, which is the premier group, that's when it's like, hold on, buddy, you contradicted the group. So you went against the group. So the Sahih Hadith can't have that. It's not just the issue of verifying the chain, only that there's no breaks in the chain. It's also that what's transmitted can't go against what we know to be solid already. Right? That's another way that we check. It's not just the issue that we say, oh, there's a connection between here and here and here, and there's no hidden defects or whatever, and we just call it a day. No, we verify this piece of information with this solid information over here. It all has to come together in that regard. Remember that we said when we talked about the 7 theories, you go here, the science of working with contradictions. Somebody may say, well, what about if they're both sahih but they just contradict us? Sometimes there's a way of integration. That happens especially like in the hadith, like in not necessarily in the chain of transmission, but that happens more in the meaning. Once we get by the chain of transmission, we're solid. But that can happen, the reconciliation in the meaning. Like for instance, sometimes you see these brothers come and and brother Arifi finishes Salat al-Fard and he's praying sunnahs, and another brother comes and he makes a jama'ah with him. It's all good. And that, that becomes for the Hanafis,
it's not allowed.
and for the Malikis, it's not allowed. And they bring you the hadith. The Imam is the one to be followed in intention, and they interpret the hadith to me in intention and form. So I'm praying fard. Bro, like, why are you praying sunnah with me? Go over there. I'm praying one salah, you're praying another. But then Mu'adh bin Jabal, he did that with the prophets. So some say, hold on a second. They say, Mu'adh did that. You guys have the hadith, we have this hadith. To allow us to practice. So then they say, hold on a second, but that was specifically from what? So then the other group snaps back and they say, well, what's your proof that that was specifically from what? That's how practice develops in the deen. It's not just the issue of we just make it up. We're going through all this authentication process and the reconciliation and meaning. This is why Muslims in today's time, a lot of them, they don't understand these things and they think it's just a simple affair and they have doubt in the deen. They don't even know how solid, Islamic scholarship went into all of that stuff. Anybody that throws some kind of idea out there, it sounds right. That's what we always say. Watch. It's not just the issue of thinking. Because some thinking may sound logical, but it actually may not cooperate with experience. Because this is not just the issue of thinking. This is the issue where I have to actually go do work. I have to go to Bukhara and check. Who are you? I have to investigate. And so it has something to do with being involved in the world and time and history and so on and so forth. And being accurate and relating what I saw her. Because the Prophet ﷺ is not an idea. The Prophet was a human being that lived. So we're talking about historical reality, right? So when you miss that part, you just make it's just about ideas. You know what I'm saying? So here we talked about the issue of the hidden defect. So in the way that he organized this, Hafid ibn Hajar doesn't do it that way. Because these things come afterwards. Talking about the shad and talking about the hidden defect. What comes here in Hafid ibn Hajar's definition of the Sahih, first that the chain should be connected. First of them is that it's sound and that it is neither broke. He's talking about the chain. And then it says that it's narrators in the chain. This part will come first in Hafid ibn Hajar, which is more logical. That every narrator is not a follower of Ertugrul. Every narrator is upright in their deed and accurate. Those things come together. Deed and accuracy. The accuracy pertains to their memory and it pertains to their writing. The two things go together. And that person should relate from another person that's similar to you. Or her. That this person is reliable, so this person should be reliable as well. With good deeds, sound memory. Not known to be a mudallis. A mudallis is the one that they present to people like they heard the knowledge, but they didn't. Because that becomes almost like a form of lie. There's a tadlis that's acceptable, but overall, they don't like it. The scholars don't like it.
So they're not literal, they just kind of roughly convey the meaning.
So they're saying like, I heard.
Oh.
How did you hear it?
Okay.
Versus, my sheikh told me. Right? There's forms in the language that give you this understanding that they met.
Yeah.
Today is deep because it's like you have, the issue with the technology. You know what I'm saying? The issue with the technology. I know a brother that happened to him. He had a Facebook friend who was being investigated. They never met, and they tried to affiliate the two like those. You see it, you know, it's there on the Facebook. You can look at the locations and everything. You know that there's no actual connection. It's just association.
Is it closing Facebook now?
It doesn't matter if you close Facebook. There's facial recognition all over Chicago. Facebook is part of the system. So in any event, the issue comes in that the mu'tamid concept here, fi dhabtihi wa naqlihi, he's reliable, just as this person is reliable in their conveying of the information, right? And their transmission of it. The Hasan Hadith is tricky because the Hasan Hadith technically meets all the criteria for the Sahih Hadith, but there may be just like something in the Dabit issue. We talked about this before, but you know we're reviewing the manzuma itself. The Hasan is tricky because the whole issue comes back is the Hasan, like what you said about the Mutawatir, is the Hasan Sahih or not? So
There are
sometimes,
multiple, yeah.
remember we said, did we say, yeah, we mentioned this. We mentioned this here. We have it here. That we have the Sahih Hadith, that this is the core, Sahih in itself, stands alone. And then we said that the Hasan Hadith is similar to this, except that there in the dhabit, on the accuracy of the person, there's a slight issue, very slight. But in everything else, they stand. When it goes below that, then it becomes da'if, but it's not too da'if, right? Not too da'if.
You said if it has support from another narration, then it becomes
Hasan.
Hasan.
Hasan with support.
And Hasan
But the
Hasan
Hasan in itself is Sahih li ghayr. But it has some support from some words. It's a little tricky. What? Wahaj?
You gotta think about this protest.
Bro, you have a shirt that says make chai not war. That's a straight political, subcontinent political statement.
Pun intended. Pun intended.
The cleanest shirt in the room.
Make chai not war.
There
So-
is another context to it. The Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, in his childhood or in his youth, he used to be a tea seller.
Mm.
So that's why the chai has this context.
Is it a
like
chai one?
That make chai, like don't do war, but make chai.
You see how context becomes everything.
It's deep. This is deep, brother.
It is.
We've had the cleaning.
It is because if you don't know that history, that background, the statement just has its own meaning. And that's the same thing with that's why we do this stuff, the same thing with the Quran.
Yeah.
That if you don't have all of this stuff, you can make the Quran say whatever.
You can take this as a negative context too. Be like, oh, it was like the British, they're the ones that came and started selling chai to your people, and they're the ones that started the war, so now it's negative.
So you're blaming the British?
I blame the British for everything.
There's a lot to blame.
Yeah, there's a lot of blame.
How do you
Enough blame to go on for everybody.
Actually, we should just say we should just be like, just pay us. At this point, there's a bottom line. Everybody just wants reparations, man. That's the.
There's good on both sides.
There's great people on both sides.
So here the Hasan, it says, this is important. رِجَالُهُ This is here لا كالصحيح اشتهرت. Right? So here is just saying that the narrators are not at the same level of the Sahih that are known. They are not at the same level as those who relate the Sahih Hadith, and they're known for their accuracy. That should be better. And we know the difference between them. How? We said there was a technique. How do we know the difference between them? Well, you bring together. We bring them together. when we bring the narrations together, we begin to see the narrators and we can compare and we can determine, a lot with that. But it also is knowing them, knowing their backgrounds and all of that and so on and so forth. Bringing the ahadith together in one place is important. Imam Muslim does that in his Sahih. Imam Muslim is very different than Bukhari. Imam Muslim brings narrations under one topic, he brings them in one place. Right? And so you get to see those different narrations that come in one place and they kind of strengthen it. Imam Bukhari is not like that. Imam Bukhari will take one narration and he'll have it in multiple places in his book because he'll show that one narration is suitable in tahara, is suitable in divorce, is suitable in oaths, like that. He takes, his fiqh has a lot to do with his organizational logic. So if he puts the hadith here in this section and he organizes a title around it with a theme, that means that he says that hadith belongs, the understanding of hadith is under this theme. And that hadith can show up under 3 or 4 themes. So it means that you can take 3 or 4 themes out of the hadith. So they were pretty advanced with that stuff. So then, وَكُلُّ مَا عَنْ رُتْبَةِ الْحُسْنِ قَصُرٍ. That as soon as now that we get away from that category of Hasan that we talked about, there's just a slight issue maybe in the memory of the person or something like that. Nothing that is very detrimental. Then now there's a deficit or a deficiency, it falls short. Right? He said, and all that falls below the rank of the fair or the Hasan hadith is weak. فهو الضعيف. وأقسامه وهو أقسام الكثر وأقسامه. That the weak, and we mentioned that. We said this. We said we mentioned quite a few of them when we went here. We said that when the connectivity breaks, you can get a number of different scenarios. So when we talk about the issue of the hadith being mawdu' or fabricated, it comes into this issue.
Character of the
Like
person.
the lies, yeah. If there's an issue here, then the hadith is not hit. When we start talking about the hadith being hasan and all that, a lot of times it's talking about the issue of the memory of the person, not the deen of the person. If the person is a liar, is a problem. Some people are blamed for things, but there's no proof. No tawaqqaf until we have the proof. But if the person is mubtadi', they categorize it 2 different directions too. There's a hadith that are sahih that are related by the people of bid'ah. But it's just that they were known not to lie and this and that, right? Or they were known not to be extreme in their group affiliation. But they're given their own category. So then with the issue of accuracy and the memory, going back to that point, when it gets too bad, first of all, a person has a lot of mistakes. Or they're neglectful. Or they just have a really bad memory. And we mentioned that in the case of Alzheimer's and all of that. And so that has a lot to do with, the quality of the narrator with regard to what? Dabat. So we have that here.
Where do we draw the line of where we can take the meaning from something, even though it's like you know how we grew up listening to the hadith that Jannah to Tahtu, like the Jannah lies, and there's
Yeah.
feel the mother, right? And then when we grew up, everybody's like, oh, that's a weak hadith, that's a weak hadith. So there was one side that I heard.
Go to your mom and say that, and she'll see where you landed at.
Yeah, right. One side was like, oh, you can still take the meaning of it, right? And then there was other side people are saying that like you could take that like hadith could mean something else, and like you could be doing some sort of bid'ah or something like that.
No, there's rules that is not shadid al-da'f, that is not extremely weak.
Yeah.
And we mentioned some of the reasons for weakness, lying and fabricating and even all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
That is not in those categories. You know, and also that it doesn't contradict a basic tenet of the deen. And usually it, you know, for some of the scholars, they're very strict on the angle of that it's in the fadail, it's something encouraging you to something that's good, not in the knowledge of halal and haram.
Yeah. But say like what about like, you know how the Tabligh Jamaat they read like Fada'al Amal, right? Is like the issues like in those books, is it like does it go so far to like lying and like other stuff, or is it just
The thing with the Tabligh Jamaat is that it's like the thing with the Fadail Amal is that the Fadail Amal is just that it's a book in Fadail. It's a book encouraging you to certain things. And so those who have first of all the sources are there in the Fadail Amal. Sources are kind of where it came from, where he's taking it from. They're there, so you can investigate. There may be some hadith that has issues, but in the framework, for him, it doesn't have issues because it's operating in a framework which supports. And that's a tarbiyah. That's a tarbiyah book. No, not the artist. Is a tarbiyah book. Fadail Amal is a tarbiyah book. Maulana Zakaria, he brought together ayat of the Quran, ahadith, statements of the scholars, statements of the salihin, under the tarbiyah program that they use. And so basically he's talking about reading the Quran, salah, dhikr. Then he has some other books too, but in the Fadail, that's most of what you're getting. And also, you know, the whole concept of jihad. And the concept of jihad is not limited to war. It's limited to struggle on multiple levels for the deen. And so that's kind of what Fadail Amal is about. So then the issue becomes, he may see those ahadith to be acceptable, and that another scholar may be more stringent. That's what Kemal was saying, that there's conditions. So it's not relative. It's not just like he say, she say. It's like, okay, if you said something, give me the criteria or the rules. Show me the process. You get the point or no?
all right?
So I mean, because there's some hadith in Ibn Majah that are considered mawdu'. But they, you know, does that mean you throw out everything, or what's more better for accuracy? Keeping it and knowing where it stands, or throwing it out? Which one is better?
Keeping it, no, I understand.
Keeping it, knowing where it stands. What if you throw it away? What happens?
Shows up later on.
No, not shows up later on.
There
What-
may be
what did
another
you do?
hadith that might support it.
No, not for the mawdu'a.
Not for the model, yeah.
Not for the mawdu'a can't be supported. It's fabricated. But what happened? What do you do when you get into that habit?
Oh, then you just become stingy about it. Like you mean like
Not stingy. That you know,
Means you won't know if
it becomes an issue where now, because you don't like it,
yeah.
you're taking out anything.
I think I should.
That's kind of like the whole debate in this country with regard to free speech. There's the principle of free speech. There's things I may not like, but we follow with the free speech concept. And
So is it kind of like you're saying like it can't be black and white?
what I'm saying is that in research, just because things don't fit into your program, we already have we have a category for that. It's called the Mawdu'a Hadith.
No.
We're not saying that we're going to change it and bring it up to the Sahih Hadith. We're saying that, look, this information came to us. It's like, okay, it came to us. Okay, it came to us. We keep it here. There's no necessity to throw it out or whatever. We labeled it. It came to us. We know that it's there. That's fair. Imagine what brings more doubt. If we just start taking and hiding information and throwing it out, or we leave it there. Like the non-Muslim, they try to bring that garbage. It's like, dude, you're following the books that our scholars put together. Our history books are this or that. So you want to take our books and tell us that we fabricated. You wouldn't even know that that was there if it wasn't for the fact that what they call the al-amanat al-ilmiya, right? Academic trust, academic integrity. Convey the thing as it is, not how you want it to be. Right? You convey the information as it is, not how you want it to be. And that's what they did. Even if the hadith, they determined it was fabricated, they determined it was fabricated. That's the issue with the daif hadith too. That some of them have that principle that you can't just throw out daif hadith because there's a possibility that it can be verified. We have a lot of hadith that are sahih. We have plenty that are sahih. This type of technicality is in the realm of some stuff that the scholars may have some debate. Now, I will say something that may cause doubt to people. That one of the largest collections of hadith, we don't know where it went. The Musnad al-Baqi ibn Mukhlit. It was one of the largest collections of hadith. I have a theory about this stuff, though. I have a theory that the non-Muslims, when they colonized the Muslim world, they do what they do. Like, the example is like Bosnia. One of the things that they did in Bosnia is they immediately went to the library. Poof, they burnt it up. Iraq invasion, Bush era. Immediately, poof, Quran, Sahih Hadith, Sahih Bukhari. They took one of the oldest copies of the Quran. Because there's about 5 or 7 of them like that in the whole of the dunya. So the spoils of war. So I have a theory that some of that stuff is in some private library somewhere. I have that theory also, and I have some support for that. But to be able to say this is exactly what happened, I don't have support for that. But for instance, Mahmoud Shakir, he said that happened. Mahmoud Shakir said that when the colonists came, one of the things that they did was they took the knowledge, and that's how the European Enlightenment kicked off. And we find that Princeton University, Library of Congress, Leiden in Europe, those places are some of the most places that have manuscripts. All of our stuff is not in print form. This is print form.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff is in written form. And to prove what I'm saying to be fact, that sometimes we don't know how to deal with this, go and look at the history of Timbuktu. For a long time, it was scientific opinion. You could not go against it. Africa has no written history. That was their concept. And then, with some time, it came out. Whole families had massive libraries and writing. They had hid the libraries because they didn't want the books to be stolen. So now they're in the fight to try to preserve that stuff in library form. But I have the same theory when it comes to political thought. It does not make sense to me that you have an ummah for 1400 years, and I said that before. It does not make sense to me at all that you only have about 4 books that are talking about the political order. It doesn't make sense at all, period. You know what I'm saying? And so that's something that we don't look at. For a long time in Turkey, everybody's beloved Turkey, for a long time the PhD, average PhD in Islamic study, you couldn't access the libraries. Only the non-Muslim can go. And when they come, what they do is they come like this. Aisle 1.5, you have 1,000 manuscripts. 500 of these manuscripts are on fiqh. Out of those 500 in fiqh, 200 are on Hanafi fiqh. Then they classify everything. When you come, you don't even know what's going on in there. When they come, they have a library, index, or catalog, or whatever. They know exactly what's in there. That's a big problem. In places like Timbuktu, that's why initially we had mentioned that it wasn't only talking about like hadith sciences and things that pertain to revelation. They were dealing with medicine, mathematics, agriculture. Now all this permaculture stuff that's coming in, they were dealing with stuff like that. They were dealing with what did they call that? Community planning, development planning. They used to build the masajid in a geographical way, and then the homes in a geographical way, and then they have all kinds of concepts in that. The civilizational aspect. So for me, I think that there's a strong argument there that still needs to be tested in some areas, that we just lost a lot of stuff. It was taken. But for what we need, as far as hadith is concerned, we have what we need to practice the deen, to understand this stuff. It's just that sometimes Baqir bin Makhlad, he may have brought the narration from different angles, right? But it's not going to subvert.
For us, it's a matter of faith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has preserved what we need, right?
No, it's not just a matter of faith.
Means, no, in the sense, what we need for hadith and Quran, obviously both, are preserved because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, I will preserve.
Yeah, but it's not all. Kamal, we're not going to go through all this just to say we have Iman. We're going through the process, the scientific process.
No, I'm not saying no, but as a faith principle, we do believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah, as a faith principle, we do. But it's not only.
That does not mean we just use that. We need to go into detail
Yeah.
how it was preserved and all that.
Right, because these things come up to the youth, right, and they throw that stuff in your face, and then you have to be in that position to be able to be patient with them and say, no, it's not like.
Yeah, we can't just say we believe because Allah
Yeah.
subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's not the answer for everybody.
Yeah, but it's a solid answer for the people to be mad.
Yeah.
That's why we too, and this is the issue that I have with some people. If somebody has Aqidah where they just say, I believe in Quran, Sunnah, that's it, don't come and tell me that you need to have rational arguments for proving the existence of Allah and this, that. Let the person be. Everybody doesn't have to be in that realm. You see what I'm saying? And I think that we don't respect that sometimes. The other group say Quran, Sunnah, and then there's some people that in their mind they're going through intellectual stuff. They need to work that out. Have respect for them. And the other people too that want to like to deal with the rational stuff, let the other people, they may not want to be with that. Let them be. Right? So that is, from an Imam perspective, you're right. It's foundational, right? But from a Tarbiyah perspective, that's not going to work.
Yeah, definitely.
Because the Murabbi has to be, that's what, the
sort
Murabbi
of-
has to be able to answer that stuff. Because if you're not, you have to be in that process of being able to work through that stuff. If you're not in the process of being able to work through it, it creates a big issue. Let's take a little break, inshallah.
Okay.
So I brought some of these books. This book, small, but this talks about like the preservation of hadith. Preservation of hadith. This talks about the history of hadith, how it was codified. This is actually a PhD thesis by Mustafa Subai, who was from the movement. He was a sheikh from the movement. And he did this PhD thesis. It was translated. And it deals with the Sunnah and the role of legislation. So when some people, because the Quraniyun started to doubt the role of the Sunnah. And so they started to say that, why should we accept these hadith that fabricated this, that. So he goes into topics like definition of the Sunnah, fabricated hadith, efforts of the scholars to purify and authenticate hadith, the fruits of those labors, various doubts concerning the Sunnah over centuries, Sunnah, how it's dealt with by the Shia, the Khawarij, other groups. He deals with a lot of these issues, and the non-Muslims, the Orientalists. That's one thing he was very strong on, that he was aware of the fact that the Orientalists, they came up with their concept. Dr. Taha Jabir, he mentioned that, you know, not all Orientalism is the same, but there's some groups. I mean, it's maybe not politically correct, but Israeli Orientalism it poses a deep challenge. You know, that's one of the things that he was saying, that they were pretty intense in their in the way that they handled, you know, the whole issue of doubts in the deen and stuff. What's going on, bro?
What's going on with you?
Time is passing by.
Oh, I don't know.
Bro, you were quiet all the whole time. Where did he go?
Yeah, well, I was trying to listen. Trying to comprehend everything. That's all. What's up with you? How's everything?
Bro, what's going on, bro? You came outside like it's summertime. T-shirt with this light jacket.
Light jacket? Yeah, it's 2 jackets, man. Yeah, it's warm. I'm good.
This guy, he like has a universal school.
He lives right across the street, so he jogs over here. He got his heart rate going, you know.
Mm-hmm. No, I drive you because shit gets my heart rate going.
Oh,
Over here.
oh really? That's,
The content.
that's good. That's good.
How's it going, man?
How's everything?
Alhamdulillah.
You're not recording right now, right? It's not.
We are recording.
Why? It's just a break right now, man.
Good call, but
So this retreat is official?
yes, inshallah.
Everything is good to go?
Unless there's no pauses there, just end, right?
Honestly, I don't know. I never did it, so. Yeah,
You'll
just
start on
leave it alone. I
You'll
want
start
you
on the
to
one.
myself.
Oh, you know what? I can mute it.
There you go.